Hello and welcome to another edition of Weapons and Warfare. For Straight Arrow News, I'm your host, Ryan Robertson. And as you can see, we are back on the road and back in Aurora, Colorado for our now annual trip to the AFA Warfare Symposium. Over the next week, we'll be visiting with industry leaders as well as Air and Space Force leadership as both branches grapple with rapidly changing dynamics at home and abroad. Speaking of changing dynamics, in this week's debrief, is U.S. leadership willing to put American troops on the front lines in the war on drugs? We visit with an Army intelligence officer and a former Green Beret to get their thoughts on the possibilities. Plus, from one defensive show to another, we're headed to Abu Dhabi for the International Defense Exhibition and Conference, also known as IDEX, to get a look at two new UAVs introduced to an international audience in our Weapon of the Week. But first, here are some headlines you may have missed.
China once again making news for pushing the limits on what its naval fleet can get away with. Leaders in Australia and New Zealand say China should have given them a heads up before carrying out what they call surprise live fire drills in the waters between their countries. Because of those exercises, several commercial flights were forced to change their routes at the last minute. In response, China's defense ministry said Australia was making unreasonable accusations and deliberately hyped the situation after 3 planes headed to New Zealand changed course in mid-flight because of live-fire drills by the Chinese Navy. The Chinese ministry's top spokesperson said China did issue safety notices in advance and that the activity was in compliance with international law and did not affect aviation safety. The presence of 3 Chinese warships in the region, a frigate, a cruiser, and a replenishment vessel, had gotten the attention of the Australian and New Zealand militaries before the incident. Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles described the activity as unusual, though not unprecedented. A new study from the Mitchell Institute is raising concerns about U.S. space weapon policies, overclassification, and a weak warfighting ethos, all of which the study determined hurt public perception of the Space Force. The study followed a workshop with 55 experts discussing how the Space Force might address future crises. It also highlights a disconnect in understanding the Space Force's role and notes that policies remain outdated despite claims of space as a warfighting domain. Recommendations include new space weapon policies, increased funding and personnel, and better communication about the Space Force's mission. It also calls for enhanced monitoring capabilities, sharing information with allies and U.S. leadership, in establishing responsible space behavior norms. More fallout from the collision between a U.S. aircraft carrier and a merchant vessel off the coast of Egypt last month. The commander of the USS Harry S. Truman was removed from command. Captain Dave Snowden was relieved by Rear Admiral Sean Bailey, commander of Carrier Strike Group 8. Snowden, who served as the Truman's commanding officer since December 2023, will be temporarily assigned to Naval Air Force's Atlantic. The relief occurred after the Truman was involved in a collision with a merchant vessel on February 12th, while operating in the Mediterranean Sea in the vicinity of Port Said, Egypt. Despite the visible damage done, the Navy says there is no impact to the USS Truman's mission or schedule. The Nimitz-class aircraft carrier is currently deployed to the U.S. 6th Fleet Area of Operations.
For years, Hollywood told and retold stories centered on the border between the U.S. and Mexico.
Suelte la pistola.
From Sicario to Sin Nombre to The Marksman.
This ain't worth it, boys.
All with varying degrees of realism and accuracy, illustrating the long-running tensions at our southern border. Of course, you don't have to look any further than the headlines to see the latest updates on this decades-old issue. But now, with a new administration in the White House, the potential for something we've never seen before exists. Regular American troops going head-to-head with Mexican drug cartels. And that's the subject of this week's debrief.
One of the many executive orders signed by President Donald Trump since retaking the Oval Office called for the State Department to label Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs. The president is motivated by the rise in opioid and fentanyl-related deaths, largely attributed to the cartels and their smuggling operations. Secretary of State Marco Rubio did label 8 Mexican criminal organizations, including the Tren de Aragua gang and the Sinaloa cartel, as FTOs after the department's Bureau of Counterterrorism showed the groups were engaging in terrorist activities, which are defined as premeditated, politically motivated violence perpetrated against non-combatant targets by subnational or clandestine groups. But just because the United States now officially recognizes the cartels as terrorist organizations doesn't mean a full-scale U.S. invasion to root out Mexican cartels is going to happen.
Yeah, I think it was really the message that was most important when it came to targeting or labeling these cartels FTOs.
John Molick is an active duty U.S. intelligence officer.
I mean, they're already targeted with some pretty significant law enforcement authority. The Drug Enforcement Administration works very hard on the border and in other places to curb the drug smuggling from said cartels, and Homeland Security Investigations does as well, the FBI. So, there are already a lot of laws on the books dealing with what are traditionally called transnational criminal organizations, TCOs. And so there's a bit of an increase in financial authority, financial investigative authority. You can seize some real property, you can seize financial assets and stuff, and you can break financial transactions between U.S. citizens and those cartels. But there isn't a huge leap, if you will. It's more about messaging.
If we take those gloves off and this becomes a kinetic fight, let's push things out to the right. What would that look like? Is it soft units? Is it HIMARS on the Rio Grande? What would a kinetic fight with the cartels look like?
Yeah. So again, assuming the diplomatic efforts fall through and this ends up being something that is kinetic, I would say it's not the latter, more the former, in that being special operations activity, south of the border, if we wanted to get involved in that. But I would say that's something that already kind of happens in a law enforcement capacity. So I think it would be more of that. Plus, it would look a lot like, in my estimation, it would look a lot like what we do with foreign governments across the world that are allies with the United States, and that is training and bolstering and equipping those that are already there. So, and that's really the ultimate purpose of special operations forces, at least some of the groups, is to train other militaries. That's what the Green Berets do in particular.
Green Berets like Eric Brown, who spent more than 20 years with the Army's Special Forces.
You don't want to solve a problem for another country. You want to give the resources and capabilities to that country for them to solve that problem.
Brown says now that the cartels found their way onto the U.S. State Department's FTO list, new pots of money have been made available to carry out and expand operations. So, more intelligence gathering, more training of local forces, maybe some elite U.S. soldiers on the ground carrying out high-value missions. But both Brown and Molick say a full-on head-to-head fight between the cartels and conventional U.S. forces is not realistic.
I don't think they have close air support capabilities yet. I don't think they have F-35s and F-16s and C-130, Spectre gunships dropping bombs. I could be wrong, but they do have the ability to do that with drones of dropping ordnance. But yeah, I think it'd be more of a clandestine approach.
Because pulling in those more exquisite assets like a Ghost Rider gunship or something like that, obviously that would take a lot of coordination with the Mexican government as well. And like you said, the stomach for that, there could be, that would be a full scale war. There's going to be casualties and impacts of that kind of operation. So yeah, I think, obviously I'm going to agree with you. You're the expert, right? I think it probably would be more clandestine type approaches, but walk me through what that would look like. It's, special forces going in, teaching native populations, how to conduct warfare, but there's also probably going to be some smaller squads, doing some ninja type stuff in the middle of the night, right?
Yeah. I like that analogy. ninja squads. You better watch out. Somebody in the government might take that and name a ninja squad. Yeah, if you're training, let's say an elite force with the Mexican military, go head on and hit those strategic strikes. But if you do have, let's say, what we did in Afghanistan and Iraq, right, with the HVT, a high value target, that you can get permissions and authorities to do a kill capture mission. That's when you would bring in the force that does that for the America side, where you gain that intelligence, you infiltrate under clandestinely at night or whatever the time that they're not expecting it, and you come off the truck or the air platform, and you execute a target and then fly back, either killing or capturing. But like you said, you have to have that's when America and Mexico have to high five and agree on that, because no one wants our ninjas to come into their country because they're sovereign, right? We wouldn't want Mexico to have a ninja squad to come into America to execute what they deem a high value target.
Apart from ninja squads carrying out clandestine missions on high-value targets, Brown says the U.S. could decide to use drones, like an MQ-9 Reaper, to take out certain cartel members. Sort of how, like during his first term in office, President Trump ordered the strike on Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian terrorist leader who was blown up while in Iraq.
When we did that to him, I mean, Iraq got mad, but nothing happened, right?
When it comes to using Reapers to take out drug factories, though, John Molick says the juice may not be worth the squeeze.
In terms of kinetic response, using platforms like the Reaper, which has that capability, that's all about tactics. And what I mean by that is to say, how effective would it be to conduct targeted strikes against, say, drug labs that are being operated within one cartel? It's likely going to be just as effective as going after IED locations, facilitation locations within Afghanistan. I mean, it would have an immediate impact, and then someone's going to build a new drug house and it's going to move down the road and go somewhere else. So I don't know if the United States would be interested in getting involved in some whack-a-mole with all of these MQ-9s in their kinetic capacity. That's costs a lot of money, and how effective could it really be?
Infiltrating the cartels and taking out the whole operation so it can't reconstitute would be one way of dealing with the cartels, but protecting the identities of any Americans involved in those operations would be vital. Because unlike fighting the Taliban or ISIS, there is a real risk of retaliation from the cartels against soldiers' families. The criminal organizations are obviously very well funded and operate vast networks. So if a soldier's identity is discovered, the cartels absolutely have the means to act on that information. But there again, doing so may actually put the cartels in a more precarious position with the U.S. military than they already are.
The cartels are a little different than other organizations we've dealt with throughout the world. Other organizations are looking at potentially becoming nation states, taking control of land from other areas. And that's not what the cartels want. The cartels are like gangs and organized crime in the United States. They want to make money. And the only way to make money is if nobody is paying attention to them. And so if they conducted some type of operation so drastic, like killing innocents with RPGs across the border, you're going to bring the full-fledged might of the United States potentially against your operations, and now you can't make money.
So to recap, while labeling Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations does put them in the same category as Hamas, ISIS, and Boko Haram, it doesn't mean the U.S. will fight them the same way. It does mean the Trump White House is putting a lot more scrutiny on those organizations and is willing to put additional resources toward taking them down.
Serving you clarity through context, our mission at SAN is to deliver the news straight down the middle. We're different from mainstream media because we spotlight distorted headlines and show you how to do it too. Discover stories that right and left-leaning outlets are choosing not to cover by using our Media Mist tool. Download the SAN app and turn on notifications to have straight facts delivered right to your phone or tablet, and get straight facts anytime at SAN.com.
As the AFA Warfare Symposium gets started here in Aurora, Colorado, the biannual International Defense Exhibition and Conference, also known as IDEX, recently wrapped up in Abu Dhabi, but not before two of the main players in the UAV game unveiled some of their newest products, and those are the subject of our Weapon of the Week.
Covering nearly 2 million square feet of exhibition space and attracting over 200,000 visitors from more than 65 countries, IDEX is one of the premier events of its kind. So it's easy to see why defense contractors flock to Abu Dhabi every 2 years to introduce new product lines. It's also not surprising to see UAV builders like AeroVironment and Heaven Drones. First up, the Jump 20X. This is a maritime version of AeroVironment's Jump 20 drone that can launch from naval ships. The 20X is in final development, but we do know it features a heavy fuel engine with a 13-hour flight time and a payload of 30 pounds. It also has vertical takeoff and landing capabilities. Charles Dean, the company's VP of International Business, told attendees it will be available for sale soon, with advanced orders possible. AeroVironment is also known for its Switchblade loitering munitions, which the Pentagon supplied in large numbers to Ukraine, and they were also selected for the first batch of the DoD's replicator platforms. Next up, another drone maker we featured on Weapons in Warfare, Heaven Drones. The Miami-based builder unveiled its hydrogen-powered UAV, the Raider. Founder, CEO, and friend of the program, Ben Levinson, says the Raider has a 22-foot wingspan that can accommodate a 50-pound payload with 12 hours of endurance, and it also has a range of more than 620 miles. The Raider features a modular twin-boom fuselage for stability, and like the Jump 20X, it can take off and land vertically using 4 propellers with a rear pusher propeller providing forward thrust. Assembly takes just 15 minutes. Being hydrogen-powered allows the Raider to operate quietly with a low thermal and acoustic signature, making it suitable for discrete missions. The system generates hydrogen at the launch site too, ensuring continuous operation in remote areas. The Raider is designed for various missions, including tactical intelligence and logistics, and can operate for 1,000 hours between overhauls. Levinson expects it to fly later this year and be operational next year.
For our comms check this week, we're bringing you an update to a story we first talked to you about almost a year ago. The U.S. Army is moving forward in its next stage of a multi-billion-dollar contract to build mixed reality goggles. And the service is turning to somebody with some experience in the arena, Palmer Luckey, the man behind the Oculus Rift and Anduril Industries.
According to a press release, Anduril and Microsoft are expanding their partnership to enhance the Army's Integrated Visual Augmentation System, also known as IVAS. Pending Department of Defense approval, it's a $22 billion deal for Anduril, who will manage production and development with Microsoft Azure as the preferred cloud for IVAS and Anduril AI. For those needing a refresher, the IVAS program provides soldiers with a body-worn system that integrates augmented and virtual reality, something the Army says will improve combat effectiveness and situational awareness. Since its inception, IVAS faced several problems, including significant issues with user comfort, poor visual quality, reliability concerns, and a lack of soldier acceptance, primarily due to complaints about headaches, nausea, eye strain, and a limited field of view when using the headset. Luckey, Anduril's founder, says IVAS represents the future of mission command, blending technology with human capability.
All opinions expressed in this segment are solely the opinions of the contributors.
Okay, we are just about done with this week's show. As a reminder, please go online and like and subscribe to all of our social media feeds. We sure would appreciate your help growing the show. As a journalist, it's never really lost on me that sometimes I get paid to go to places that others pay to go, like this expo, for example. As a journalist in attendance, I know my core functions are to be the public's representative and find out what's going on. So whenever I'm covering a story or an event like this, I always approach it like I'm the eyes and ears of everyone who couldn't be here. finding answers to the questions they would ask if they were here. I'm of course not unique in this. There are literally thousands of journalists all over the country, all over the world, who are doing the same thing, acting as the public's representative to find out the truth, asking the questions their audiences want answered. Which is why, as a journalist, I was shocked to hear the White House will now decide which media outlets get access to the president during pooled events. The White House Correspondents Association was in charge of deciding which outlets would be included in the presidential pool. For those who don't know, a media pool is when different competing media outlets work together to cover an event. I've been a part of dozens in my career, trials, press conferences, embeds during military exercises. These are things and events where space can be limited. So competing outlets work among themselves to make sure every journalist gets what they need to tell the most accurate story. It was no different for the presidential press pool. For decades, the White House Correspondents Association managed the rotation of reporters covering the president, and its members did so democratically by voting on which outlets would cover which events. This helped ensure not only is the access fair, but that the audience, the public at large, is best served because they have access to the unadulterated truth. By taking control of who gets access to the pool, the White House says it's granting access to a new generation of news gatherers. But as a journalist, my warning sirens go off whenever someone I want to interview tries to control too many aspects of the interview. Like if they want questions ahead of time or tell me there are certain topics I can't ask about. Those are red flags. So by controlling who gets to do the interview in the first place, the White House is influencing the outcome of those interviews before they even happen. President Trump promised to be the most transparent president in history. And at this point in his tenure, he is answering far more questions than President Biden did at this point. But quantity is not the same as quality. And with this move, the quality of the questions posed to the most powerful person in the world will likely suffer. That's not a path to transparency. That's not a path to greatness. And it's not the free press that our First Amendment protects. For senior producer Brett Baker, video editor Brian Spencer, and graphics artist Dakota Patillo, I'm Ryan Robertson, Straight Arrow News, signing off.